from my perspective, the healthcare industry on the whole, in 2023, 2024, it looks a lot like the tech sector 30 years ago.
Well, hey, Paul, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good, man. Thanks for having me. I'm going to be on my best behavior, and I'm excited to hang with you.
Yeah, no, this is gonna be fun. I'm excited about diving into data and healthcare and all that. But before we do that, tell us a little bit about you and what you're doing now, because you're at StratePT, and you were telling me before how you did not come from healthcare. So just kind of walk us through, like, why are
Yeah.
you in healthcare now?
Yeah, I'll try to give you the 2-minute overview. So
Sure.
today, I'm the CEO of a company called StratePT, and we provide a unified EMR and RCM service for our clients. We'll talk about that if that's interesting. But the sort of the 2 minutes of my background is I'm not from healthcare. I've never been a PT. I'm an engineer by training, computer engineering, electrical engineering, and computer science. And I spent the last 20 some years starting businesses, growing them, and then investing in thousands of others as well. So um, some of the more notable stuff, I started a data center company about 20 years ago, 25 years ago now. We
Okay.
still operate that business. I make it sound big, like it's just my wife and I, but
Yeah.
we've got
Hey,
multiple
it's a
large data centers
company.
in Virginia. Yeah. So that's part of that's what kicked off this. And then over the years, I started a venture capital firm, co-founded something called 500 Startups, or now 500 Global. We manage about $4 billion of capital through that entity now. Co-founded another company called Bump Health in the women's health space, doing pretty well, still running, that's still running as well. And all through that, I've sort of been investing in other businesses on the side. So my wife and I try to invest in about 200 new companies a year.
Holy smokes.
And about half of those are tech, like traditional software, tech, that sort of stuff. And the other half is what brick and mortar. So bars, restaurants, code schools, daycares, taco trucks, you name it, and so that could be a different episode entirely. But I
Yeah.
share all that only because healthcare, I'm pretty new to healthcare. I stepped into this role. So StrataPT was actually founded by somebody I went to high school with.
Oh, okay.
And so Kim Peacock is still with the company. She's our COO, yeah, but she started it, and I stepped in as our CEO a little over a year ago. And so I'm new, and and I hope I don't offend people just a few minutes into the show, but you know, one of the reasons one of the things I think a lot about is that the healthcare industry. So let me speak in broad terms. Please don't get offended,
Yeah.
listeners. But from my perspective, the healthcare industry on the whole, in 2023, 2024, it looks a lot like the tech sector 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So, and I'll just give you one example as an analogy, and then I'll stop talking. Um, the New York Stock Exchange, that's got to be something that your listeners are familiar with.
Yeah.
Um, for the most part, I think the average listener will also know that right now in 2024, they can go to something like etrade.com or carlschwab.com. They can go to any online place and they can literally go and buy one share of something. They could buy one share of IBM, one share of whatever. It's like a non-issue. Nobody ever thinks about it because it's normalized now. People don't remember, though, that when I was young, I won't age you, but I'll age myself. But when I was young, people don't remember that, like, up until the late 80s, the New York Stock Exchange was closed on Saturdays and Sundays. Okay, no surprise there. But also it was closed on Wednesdays. And that's because way back when, the financial industry was not computer enabled, when it was gate kept by a few very rich people, very rich firms, that sort of thing. Everything was done on paper and everything was gate kept. It's not that technology didn't exist. It's just that some of the incumbents didn't want it. And
Yeah.
so because of that, it had to shut down on Wednesdays, Saturdays, and Sundays to process all the paper. And the point is, though, is that once technology was introduced, everything changed. And this, the really what it did was destroyed all the middlemen, all the people that gate
Yeah.
kept it. And I don't think healthcare is going to take 30 years to get there. I think we're probably somewhere in the 5 to 7 year range, because tech moves faster and faster. So let me pause there.
Yeah.
My superpower is to ramble.
No, that is awesome. That's extremely interesting. We might have you on again just to talk about the investment side and what you're doing there. But okay. So I guess then what's the connection to healthcare? You knew this person from high school and it was just like step into the CEO role and now you're running Strata, or I'm assuming you
uh,
invested in it and that's why you're here.
I will admit, let me just admit openly, and again, hopefully I won't lose any of your listeners along the way. I will admit openly that I'm a capitalist,
Yeah.
and and so when I didn't know about RCM and all this stuff. So let me take a minute to explain this. So I've got 4 kids,
Oh,
and
all right.
for anybody with kids, what you at least I'll just speak for myself. My experience as being a father is that the first time we got pregnant, I was just like, oh my gosh, like everything's crazy. I didn't, I just wanted to make sure everybody was good. I didn't really, I went to all the appointments, but I didn't really know what was happening, right? Um, but when we got pregnant with the second one, I was a lot more confident and I felt like I was able to experience more. And I started to notice these, like, I just noticed how much my wife was getting marketed to. And
Yeah.
what really triggered me was back in 2018, I think, when we were pregnant with number two. Um, my wife was getting hit up with all these postcards from a company called Aeroflow. And the long and short of it is that Aeroflow basically is one of many companies
And they
that,
bought a list
uh,
from somebody and your wife was on
yeah, they know she's
it.
pregnant. And basically what they do is they target pregnant or expecting moms and they say, hey, give us a copy of your, insurance card and we'll mail you a free breast pump. Well, I'm a capitalist and I'm like, nothing is free. So what in the
Exactly.
world is
How are they
this?
doing it? Yeah.
And so I'll just, I'll fast forward here a little bit, but over the year, I told you I had co-founded this company in the women's health space. Well, at the time, it was only doing subscription boxes for pregnant moms. I was I was selling subscription boxes to pregnant moms. We were, millions of customers, all that, and so all of a sudden I'm like, well, wait a second, how does this work? And I literally started cold calling these companies like Aeroflow and just I just acted like a dumb customer. I'm like, what, how do you do this? Why do you want my wife's info? And then finally somebody said, oh, it's really called RCM and DME and all that. And I started Googling this and I'm like, what in the
Yeah.
world is this world? And so as we kind of kept growing that, we started doing the free breast pump thing. I started learning more about DME, but that around that same time, I sort of reconnected with Kim, like, and I was like, is this what you do? And she's like, well, not really, but then as I get, so anyway, after about 2 or 3 years of figuring it out on the women's health side, so that company Bump Health is still doing well, crushing. But one thing led to another, and I was kind of like, wait a second, there's a lot more opportunity here to become sort of the payments layer
Yeah.
of healthcare. And so I spent about a year kind of getting to know him and the company a lot more closely, and then finally decided to step in as the CEO. But that's kind of the quickish version of
Yeah.
how I got into it. It's just that I'm a capitalist, and I think that the amount of money that flows through the RCM layer of healthcare, think even if you just start thinking broader than just PT, OT, speech, whatever,
Yeah. Hundreds
it's
of billions of
massive.
dollars. Yeah.
I mean, it's double digits of the US GDP. We're
Yeah.
not talking like, chump change here. It's arguably bigger than e-commerce and all these other tech sector things that I thought were big.
Yeah.
you know. Um, so yeah. So hopefully the listeners don't think any less of me, but I stumbled into RCM because they were targeting my wife,
Yeah.
and then I started to learn more, and so yeah, I think there's a big opportunity here, and I think, um, well, actually, let me pause there because I can
Yeah.
go a lot of
No,
different directions
I
on
mean,
this.
I think that's great. I think especially on the clinical side, I'm not going to say this is a problem with healthcare, but I have said it a lot to clients behind closed doors. I'm just making it public now. Clinicians as a whole, and maybe there's other industries where it's kind of like this, but clinicians just feel icky about making money, right? Because it's like there's this, it's a vocation, it's a calling, we're serving people. But I mean, I think that at the end of the day, you got to make money to make things.
Look,
Money makes the world go round, right?
I hope I don't sound too cynical here, but I think so. What that's called is an invisible script. So
Uh-huh.
when people like, it's that voice inside of our heads, like I should do this, I don't do this, here's
Yeah.
why I do this. So that invisible script is mostly formulated by your parents as you grow up.
Uh-huh.
But as you become an adult, it's actually then formulated by lobbyists and PR firms. And so where I'm going with this is that, you know, I do believe that a lot of practice owners and medical professionals get into the career because they internally want to help people. I do believe that. But then as they get into the career and start to practice and get experiences, it's it's almost like somewhere in there they're taught that making money is a bad thing,
Yeah.
that it's supposed to be this hard. But what I like to remind people is that if I run a Starbucks, or let's just take them out for a minute. Let's just say I own a what's the word? Let's just say I own a coffee shop. Well, if you walk into my coffee shop, well, there's a couple things that we need to kind of recognize here. You walk into the coffee shop and you ask me for a cup of coffee. If you don't pay me, I'm not giving you a cup of
Yeah.
coffee.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And if you do pay me, let's just say you do use a credit card. Well, you're going to swipe it right there, right? And I'm going to get that approval or denial instantly. So I'm really not letting you out of there without a coffee cup, right?
Or
Or
without
without
money.
a
Yeah.
payment,
Yeah.
you know? And on top of that, the deposit for that shows up in my bank account 2 days later.
Yeah.
Now, contrast that to when I started my first business 20 some years ago. A credit card payment was the worst because it could take me 6 weeks to see that money,
Well,
right?
yeah, and you
But
didn't
but
own that
anyway,
money right away. Like they could put a hold on it and say, "We're not giving it to you."
exactly.
Like,
You had to have
yeah,
collateral up. It
yeah,
was crazy. But today, like you and I could walk down to the local what's the word? The local Best Buy. You and I right now, and we could buy a Square credit card reader. I mean, it is that easy to accept money and start a hot dog stand, right? But now let's go back to this coffee shop example, because this is really where it grinds my gears. All right, so now you can't walk away without with a cup of coffee without paying me. We all agree with that. Okay, now I've got a bunch of baristas working there making the coffee. Well, if I don't pay them, like for better or for worse, as a business owner, there's not much that can like send you to jail except payroll.
yeah,
So here's the thing: if I'm even a penny off on my payroll for my employees, the state employment commission is coming after me. And for any of the lawyers listening, there's a term called piercing the veil. Man, you know what that means. Like you're not protected by the LLC at that point, because that, it can get pretty crazy. But so I guess what I'm just trying to say is, in this example of a coffee shop, or put any example you want in your head, in every other industry, if you do not pay your employees on time, fairly, whatever, you get in a lot of trouble. And hey, let's extend it to contractors. You don't pay your vendors, pay your contractors. Well, not only will they stop serving you, but they can also take you to court,
yeah,
right? I mean, try to skip paying your plumber, by the way. They can put a lien on your house in this country, right?
yeah,
Okay, now that we've settled that, what I'm trying to make a point of is that in every other industry in the United States of America, there are protections in place for the person doing the work, the person paying for the work. I mean, it is very, very, but there's like this exception for healthcare. Somehow it's okay if I say to you, hey, listen, listen, I'm the healthcare insurance company or whatever. Hey, listen, Rafi, I really don't like that you used red ink today.
yeah,
So I'm going to kick that back to you. Oh, hey, listen, I don't care how busy you are, Rafi, but timely filing, you missed the window. Sorry, man. Like, this is insane. This is
yeah,
absolutely insane. But yet, if I put 5 PTs in a room, they've convinced each other and themselves that this is normal,
yeah.
right? And
It's
it all comes back
unbelievable.
to this invisible script. I think we've all, um, you as a medical professional probably know the exact term for this, but like it's kind of like if you have like a nagging injury, if I had a nagging injury and you saw me walking for the first time, you'd probably notice it right away because you're like, Paul, what in the world is wrong with your leg?
Yeah.
But if I've been living with it, I'm like, oh, that's just normal. And I
Yeah.
think that's conceptually what's happened in the PT world right now is that everybody thinks it's okay. Everybody's like, oh yeah, well, what do you? I mean, like even with this Change Healthcare, yeah, you can only access TRICARE through Change. What? Are you kidding me? Like this is not a this. I was actually talking about this with somebody on our podcast earlier this week. I'm like, these are not technical limitations by the clearinghouses. These are business limitations. These are basically monopolies that are running, and it's not technology that limits it. So anyway, I warned you. I
Yeah,
can
no,
ramble
it's
about this
great.
stuff, but I get fired up about it. So
Yeah, no, and I think that's, I mean, that leads right into what Strat does, like this whole idea of RCM and why is this even a thing in the first place? But it is true, like even in, and the change thing kind of brings this to light too. Like healthcare is such a cash flow dependent business, we take it for granted that we can walk into a doctor and get seen. We can go get, go see PT. Your insurance is going to take care of it. I'm just going to cover my copay or whatever. But there's all of this on the back end that's working, authorizations and claims are being filed and it's running through a clearinghouse and you got to make sure it's attached to the ledger. Like all of that kind of stuff is happening in the back end, and all it takes is a disruption to like really put a chink in it. Like you mentioned the whole like going into a coffee shop and paying. I haven't had health insurance for 7 years, and I tell people all the time like I would never go back. But we're basically cash pay. Um,
yep.
so we walk into any kind of healthcare clinic, organization, whatever. We say we're cash patients. What's the price? We pay it. We walk away. Easiest transaction in the world, or at least it should be. Um,
Mm-hmm.
we're actually expecting, you're on number 4. We're on kid number 6 will be here in 2 weeks
Yes.
for us. So we walked into a hospital locally, and this hospital just acquired the small local hospital. So now it's like a big national corporate or whatever. My wife, they're doing the pre-registry. You got to go in, you got to pay whatever up front, yada, yada, yada. You would have thought that we were asking them to like move mountains. We were like, well, we don't have insurance. And they were like, what do you mean we don't have insurance? So it's like, well, usually what happens is you tell me how much it's going to cost. I swipe the credit card. We go our ways. Now we're like emailing some corporate guys like emailing me saying, we should have an estimate to you within 2 to 3 business days. I'm like, this should be the easiest thing in the world. But it goes back to like, healthcare isn't set up for it. It's not set up for like this simple, I provide you this service, you pay me for this service, and we can go our own ways. We built this entire mechanism of third-party payers in the back end, and where it now takes what, 45 days to completely collect for a PT visit. It's nuts. It just doesn't make
Mm-hmm.
any sense to me. So let's dive into this RCM world. For most people will understand RCM on the level, on like a high level, oh, revenue cycle management. But what does that really mean for like a private practice clinician when they're saying revenue cycle management? I know it's important. What is it? And why do they need it? Why do they really need to be concerned about it?
Um, the way I sort of explain this to my non medical friends, just to kind of like use that set that up, is I usually just say like, think of RCM as the broad set of things that have to happen in order for the practice to get paid by the health insurance company or whoever's paying, right? Like a health insurance company, whoever it is. So it's this broad set of things that have to happen in order for the doctor to see even a penny of money that they earned during that visit with the patient. So, and it starts from the day that patient walks in there for the visit, or I guess technically it starts the day they finish the notes from the visit, I suppose.
Yeah.
And it starts from that day. And then in a perfect world, it should finish up with a payment in their bank account, and depending on the payer, up to 45 days later. Like, Medicare, for example, would pay within 15 days, but that's a great one. But then you got some payers that are 45 days. Now, that's the perfect scenario, by the way. Then in reality, what really happens is that, whoever was doing your billing, maybe they were on the phone at the same time. There was just a small error, just the tiniest little thing. And all of a sudden that claim gets kicked back, but it doesn't get kicked back. Or it doesn't get kicked back right away. So if you can imagine this thing on a flow chart, the PT or the PTA or whatever closes out the notes, now there's a billing thing that starts. Now, whether they have a billing person in-house or they outsource it to some firm in Idaho or India or wherever, there's a human being that gets involved. And then they submit it. And as long as they submit it and everything's good, then the payment comes. But reality hits, and that is somewhere the human made a mistake. And now 3 days later, they're processing the claims for that day. But now that other claim from 3 days ago just came back. Hey, there's something wrong. And to make matters worse, they don't usually tell you what's wrong.
Yeah. They just deny it,
figure
right?
it out.
They give you some kind of code. It's like 8.5. Well, what does 8.5 mean? Got to go look in the manual.
See, that's it right there. And so ultimately that's what happens, is that there's this rub. And so when we think about like why, so like a lot of the latest, so I'm trying not to date this episode too much, but I don't know how to do it. So let's just say it this way. We're recording this in the like in March of 2024, and anybody listening to this knows that every January, for example, all the deductibles reset, right?
Yeah.
Well, like when that happens, it really exposes a lot of the mess of practices, because it now, you're not going to get paid until like the patient pays their part of the deductible, right? And so now it exposes whether or not the practice is actually good at collecting money from the patient.
Yeah, exactly.
The point is, though, it's just this RCM is this big set of practices that have to happen to get the practice paid, and it's complicated, it's messy, and it's got way more literal hands in it than there should be. So let me pause there because I can keep going about this too.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a good baseline. So there's this thing that's, you got to do all this stuff to get paid, and like you said, there's a lot of different hands in there, whether it be a billing company, or oftentimes you've got a billing company, billing person, and you've got like a billing software that you're paying to do it, and then you've got maybe some kind of auditor or financial person that's managing it, and like you've got a lot of hands in the cookie jar. So by the time maybe the provider receives payment for that visit, they've already spent what, 80 cents on that dollar that they made or whatever. They spent a good bit of it paying all these intermediaries. And this is where a group like Strata comes in. You're kind of removing some of that, and making it more streamlined. But then let's talk about some of the transparency, because one of the things, and I was telling you this before the show, one of the things that I really like about the way y'all have chosen to kind of, we'll just say market, because that's what it is. You're marketing this product, is it's very like open, transparent. Like a lot of your data is available on the website. I send people to the Strata, the benchmarking for like, let's see where you're at revenue per visit wise versus all of your peers in your geographic location. Like all of that is there. So talk a little bit about that. Like one, why you chose to make that data readily available, and then obviously you see some value in doing that, and what it's done for Strata and the business kind of as you've grown it.
Yeah, I will just kind of start by saying that when I stepped into the role a year or more ago, whatever it was, one of the things I was very clear about with the team is that transparency would be the name of the game. Now, let me also say it's not that the team was not transparent before that. But this industry as a whole, when I come into it from an outsider standpoint, it is not transparent. There's a lot of, there's just a lot of like gatekeeping. I remember when I was due diligencing even this company, I called a whole bunch of PTs that I had met over the years, people that friends of friends, and took them out to dinner. And it was really fascinating listening to these practice owners after they've got 2 glasses of wine in them, and you're like, hey, so what, tell me about the business, what's horrible, whatever. And I still remember like vividly, one of the guys I was talking to just looked at me, he said, Paul, I have no idea. I remember we were like driving down this street actually, And I said, like, I got him, we were talking, and he just looked at me deadpan at a red light. And we were looking around. I was like, man, there's a lot of PTs. Like, there's a lot of like therapy places on this corner. What is this? And he's like, he just looked at me deadpan. And he goes, Paul, that's not even the interesting part. The interesting part is none of these PTs, even though they might accept all the same insurance, none of these PTs probably know what the other is making.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? How does that work? Because I can, like, we're driving down the street and I can pick between a Shell and an Exxon, and I know which one is 1 cent cheaper on the gas. He's like, and that's how, what, like, all of a sudden I'm like, what in the world? So anyway, with that being said, I'm running the same playbook here that I've run at all my other businesses over the years, which is, you know, I told you I'm a capitalist, right? And
Yeah.
so here's the thing. A lot of people want to think that their industry is different. Every industry wants to say we're so different,
Yeah.
And if I haven't already, like, frustrated your listeners or whatever, I'll just say that I believe that every industry, 80% of every industry is the same. And in this context, when we talk about marketing and transparency and all that, any industry that operates through obscurity or opaqueness or whatever, you can't. Why would you fight that head on? Like what you should do is actually just put a flashlight on it. So in other words, transparency is the way to go when everybody else is gatekeeping the information.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's how you fight it. It's not about being like, I'd like you to believe I'm a nice guy. I think I'm a nice guy, but let's be very clear here. Like we're going down the transparency path because every time I run into an industry where there's like opaqueness or gatekeeping or whatever, the only way to win quickly in those industries is to just put the data out there and let people see for themselves what has been hidden from them all this time.
Yeah.
And I think I said to you in the pre-show before we hit the record buttons, this in the pre-show, and I'll say it again, for your listeners, I genuinely don't care if somebody uses Strata or not. And I mean that in a positive way. What I mean is like, I'm sharing everything we know, online, offline, everything. I'm sharing it all because I just want you to get paid. Now, I hope you do it with us, but hey, if you can get somebody else to do it, great, but just get paid for every penny you're owed, because that's not okay. Like, it's not okay that this happens in this industry. So anyway, transparency is kind of like the way we should all be. We should demand that of everybody. And I just, I remember when we first, so it took me about, I think it took us about maybe 60 days of coding to kind of like get that all figured out and get it all exposed once I started doing all that stuff. And I sent the link right back to that same guy. and I was like, hey man, I don't know if this is going to help you, but here's the first version of it. And he was like, holy cow, this replaces this annual or this monthly dinner I do. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
He's like, yeah. And so then this took me to the next thing. I hope I don't get your podcast in trouble. You might have to bleep this part out. He said, he was like, yeah, Paul, this is great. This saves me that like monthly dinner that I have to do. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, yeah, like the local I think it's the local APTA organization.
Whatever,
he's like, yeah, we're not allowed to talk about rates, on the email list. So there's a dinner that all the guys put together once a month, and I got to go down there, and then we just talk about it over dinner and figure out who's getting paid what. And he's like, yeah, now I can spend one more night a month with my family. And I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah. Well, because people want to know it, right? And they're going to sit around, they're going to figure out how it is. Yeah.
That's the thing. That's the thing that people that gatekeep information don't realize, is that eventually people will find out. It's kind of like when people have like opaque salaries, like, hey, please don't talk about salaries. Like, what do you think people will do outside of work?
Yeah.
They
or
will talk
texting
about
right there in the office. They're like, how much do you make?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it happens, right? So anyway, yeah, so we're just running this playbook where we try to give away all the data we can, and we genuinely want people to get paid, whether or not they are one of our customers, which is why you'll notice none of our calculators, none of our data is behind a paywall. or a
I was
registration
about to
wall.
say, or
None
even a
of it.
pop-up or anything like that. Yeah. Sometimes you get
Nope.
folks that are like, it's all free, but you got to give us your email address or something like that. It's
Yeah.
refreshing
Yep.
to say the least. But so I mean, I guess without getting too much into it, because you don't have to share whatever you don't want to share. You seem pretty open though. Like you're all of these benchmarks that Strata has, like on their I think it's called like the real-time payer benchmark or whatever, and you can even go down to each state, like compare yourself to where you are state-wise. And we'll
Yeah.
link to that in the show notes. People can go look at that if you run a practice. Are you basing that off of your current clients performance, or are you like looking at other data to do that? Like what's the driving force behind some of that? I'd imagine it's all the claims that you're processing for folks, right?
It's the actual claim data. And actually, if you dig even deeper into those calculate or into the public data set, you'll even see the CPT code combinations
Oh,
that get
okay.
you to those numbers.
Yeah.
So this is real data. Now, this is where like the tech nerds are going to crucify me here a little bit. It says real time. It's technically delayed, I think, up to 5 minutes, but it's
Yeah.
still near real time.
Yeah.
But if
I mean,
anybody was
5
like,
minutes in
hey,
healthcare is, that's
yeah, I
pretty
mean,
much real time.
we've
We're
got
not
enough
talking
stuff coming.
45 days. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, we've got enough data coming in. Like somebody listening to this, if they like reloaded it, 30 times in 1 minute, they'd be like, hey, you said it was real time. How come it's not working? It's because like the data actually refreshes from our back end every 5 minutes or so, or something like that. I don't know what I built there, but anyway, the point is though, is that, yeah, it's real data of the claims as they come back through our platform. One thing I should mention, because I think this is not meant to be an advertisement, but it's okay. So let me say it to you this way. I'm a big believer in foundational questions that can be universally applied. And one of those foundational questions that I think people should ask, and when I say universally, I mean you should ask this question I'm about to tell you when you're dating somebody new, when you're thinking about getting married, when you're going to do a new business deal, when you're going to pick a new CPA. The one question I think everybody should ask of a new partner is this: what is something you believe that everybody else in your industry or your profession will disagree with? And
yeah.
when you think about that question, now I'll bring it to my answer as it relates to Strata and the RCM world as a whole. I do not believe you can mix and match the technology stack at a practice. We at Strata do not believe that you should have to pay for software. So what that means is we actually just give away the EMR. We give away the software, the scheduling. You don't have to bolt all these. This is crazy that in
Yeah.
2024 people pay all these fees or whatever, right?
It's like an
So
add-on for this, an add-on for that, or you're piecemealing it
right,
with, this server and that, that vendor or
right,
whatever.
right. Now, and I'll just, as I say this, I hope people will kind of like take this, like understand the context here. The numbers we post on the website are real. You'll even see our own revenue numbers, like how much money goes through the platform on any given time period. You can literally see it all right there. One thing I want people to understand is the entire size of our team. We're like 35 people. We're all in the US, but it's only 35 people. And the thing is how do you do that? Well, it's all technology.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously great people. I got to say that, right? Great people, but technology, like, how do you fight the payers? It's not going to be, you can't fight multi-billion-dollar payers unless you have an army of 1,000, billers. But even then, you're not going to win. It's technology you got to use, because like code doesn't sleep. Code doesn't need a day off. Code doesn't care if the payer made them wait on hold for 30
7
minutes,
hours. Yeah.
right? So the code's going to do its thing. Anyway, like the thing that so now like let's get really deep into this.
Yeah.
When I talk about this question of like what we believe that everybody else will disagree on is that we don't think you should have to pay for software. We don't think you should have to mix and match software. And it's not even that you shouldn't have to mix and match software. It's that you should not mix and match software. So the easiest way for me to explain this now, because this is really, really important. This is one of the foundational things that I think people need to understand for their own practices. the RCM cycle, we can all agree, is super important because if at any point it gets screwed up, you're not going to get paid, regardless of
Yeah.
whether you use us or not. If your biller screws it up, if your vendor screws it up, you're not going to get paid. But here's the thing: your scheduling system needs to know how many visits might be left in that
Yeah.
patient's plan. Your EMR should kind of know if RTM is an option for this person, right? Like, well, here's the thing: most EMR companies out there right now are bolt-ons, right? Like they have API connections to so-and-so biller, da da da. But on top of that, they started as an EMR first, right? So
Yeah.
here's the
They're just
thing: for
housing
any
clinical records. That was their whole
right,
job.
right, and that is important. Don't get me wrong, but here's the thing: if you don't understand the foundation of billing, the foundation of RCM, then how do you know if the way you've structured your medical records is actually relevant to getting paid? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, like I can talk all day about, or like a lot of EMRs will talk about their features. They'll be like, "Oh, we've got AI this or AI that." Like, oh, okay, you don't understand billing because who's at fault if that AI wrote the wrong thing in the note? Are you like whenever people are like, "Oh, we made this new AI note taking thing," I'm like, "Okay, you've never gotten paid before or never had to
Yeah.
worry about getting paid
Never
before."
submitted it. Yeah.
you know, so the point is though is that like if you think about us, if you look at our history, we're like 14 years old, and actually, and I say this with all the respect in the world, we started as a billing company. We started out in many ways just like a lot of the other billing companies out there, spreadsheets duct taped with emails and attention to detail. Like that's our history. And then over the years we tried to integrate with all the EMRs, and we did all that. And you know what happened is that like when somebody didn't get paid, they didn't call the EMR, they called us.
Yeah.
And we're like, well, hang on, you shouldn't have like treated that patient. And
Yeah.
they're like, well, how was I supposed to know? I'm like, well, your EMR didn't tell you that, you know?
Yeah.
And so eventually we actually killed off all APIs. We don't integrate actually with any other EMR now because the integration doesn't matter unless the EMR actually surfaces the billing data, like don't schedule the appointment unless
You're going to get paid. Yeah.
right. And so anyway, that's why we give away the software. We actually ended up having to build our own EMR to make this happen. It's not fun. I mean that with all
Yeah.
respect. It's not fun, but it's the only way to make it work. Like we had to like verticalize the software stack, And so anyway, that's the thing. And I think that like we just don't think you should have to pay for this
Yeah.
software, and we also don't think we should get paid unless you get paid. You know, I think one of my, if you like Google me and like scroll back on my Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever, one of the things I've said for 20 years, just like nonstop, is like, I really do think that the one of the most important things that the internet brought to the world is that access to information, right? Like
Yeah.
I remember growing up, like unless you had a rich kid living down the street that had access to the Encyclopedia Britannica, you didn't know anything back in the 80s, right? Like there was
Yeah.
no way to learn. But now you can Google it. And so from our perspective, when I think about giving away information, I believe that information should be free. You got to pay for the work though, right? So like even with this, people, if anybody like isn't totally turned off by me now, they're probably if they've made it this far. Here's the thing: most people look at what we do in terms of giving away this information. They're like, oh my gosh, Paul, if you give away the information, what happens? These people will never pay you or whatever. It's like, okay, hold on, buddy. Here's the thing: if you give away information and somebody goes on and does something cool with it, great. They were going to do it anyway. They were going
Exactly.
to do it anyway. Nothing you were going to say was going to change their mind. Even if they became a customer of yours, uh, behind the gatekeeping and all that, they're going to find out enough anyway that they're going to go do it. Like that's just like, let's not kid ourselves here. Like hiding information does not make the problem go away. It just slows it down. And so from our perspective, the way I think about it is give it away, give it away, give it away. Worst case scenario with that, you get value, other people get value, even if they never talk to me or use our service. the best case scenario is the few percent that are like, hey, I believe what you believe, Paul. They come. They let
Yeah.
us, they let us do it for them. So anyway, yeah, give away more information. Like even for the PTs listening, like I don't know if you're on TikTok or Instagram or whatever, like
That's a big
talk
one.
about what you do. Like give
Yeah.
away the advice. Like even like this is why I love your content strategy. It's like the I was just talking about you and your practice to somebody else today, yesterday, and I was like, yeah. Like he's got somebody that works there that actually is training for a marathon. It was like one of the most memorable things you said when you came on our show, and I'm like, this is amazing because like I'm training for marathons and I can watch that content and get something out of it. And look, 99% of the people that watch that content probably are not within driving distance of your practice,
Exactly. Yeah.
right? But that's not the point. The point is like you're giving it away and nobody else is.
Yeah.
And the thing is I don't know,
It's
it's
about
so
crafting
smart.
it's about crafting this, like, not an aura, but you're positioning yourself as an expert. And experts, someone said this to me one time that I thought was really good. Like, you should think about spreading your expertise kind of like a crop duster, like far and wide. Half of those, like, obviously not, you just said it, 99% of the people that read it aren't gonna be in a position to pay you. They're not gonna be, for whatever reason, they're not geographically close to you, they're not gonna whatever. um you get paid when you have to land that crop duster and consult with the farmer about what he needs on his field, right? So, I think that's just the way to do it. Like, you spread that information, it's out there anyways, or people could find it. Like you said, they're gonna become customers of yours to find out what you're doing and then go do it somewhere else, like,
Yeah,
it's they if
absolutely. Like
where there's
they're
a will,
gonna
there's a way.
exactly they're gonna do it with or without you anyway. So you might as well give it away. And I think okay, so this is you might edit this out or might want to edit this out if it doesn't make sense, but for whatever it's worth, like so let's just assume for a minute that some of the listeners here are entrepreneurs of some sort, whether
Yeah.
they're entrepreneurial in their own careers or they own their own practice, whatever. Like let's just say they're entrepreneurial. For the next like 60 seconds, I'm going to speak to them. Here's the thing. I'm not any smarter than anybody else. I really am not. I feel like I'm a dog chasing a car. That's how I spent the last 43 years of my life. But here's the thing. What I'm about to tell you, I have no scientific proof for. I don't know how to like prove this to anybody, but I can tell you that all of my success in my career, financially and otherwise, has come from three rules that I don't like. Again, I have no scientific backing in this, but this is what I believe, and you'll see in a minute that it applies to everything that we're talking about here. Okay, so there's a game people play. And that game of life is what they taught you in school, what your parents baked into you, like work hard, do what you say, like all those things that we all learned, right? That's the game people play, right? Um, and then there's the invisible game of how the world actually works. Now, if for anybody it's like already cynical, they can turn the pod off and walk away and whatever. But here's the thing: if it was true that everybody's playing the same game, then there would not be some people driving a $10,000, Corolla and other people driving a $500,000 Ferrari, right? In other words, if we were all playing the same game, then everything should be normalized. So the fact that there are disparities across industries and roles and ages and stuff like that suggests that there's an invisible game. That invisible game, why some people get ahead and others don't, whether it's financially, freedom wise, whatever it is, really comes down, in my opinion, to three rules. The three rules of the invisible game are this. Number one, you never fight an elephant head on. Number two, your brand is not what you said it is, it's how other people perceive you or talk about you. And number three, if you understand the hopes, fears, and dreams of the person or the people across the street, the table from you, you can do anything you want. And so, like in the context of this industry, for example, the elephant. Well, the elephant in the context of RCM is healthcare payers. Well, you're not going to fight a healthcare payer head on. So you either need to go cash pay 100%. You can do that, or if you're going to accept some sort of insurance, you need to either have an army of hardworking people that are going to like pay attention to details, or you need to embrace technology and code and build an army of robots that never sleeps and
Yeah.
can whittle them down, right? And then even in terms of brand, like, you know, um, like when we give away information and stuff like that, like what I say about Strata is irrelevant. What people believe about it or read about it is real. Like what they decide. And so if I just give away all the information, I let people make the decision they want about what they believe we are. It doesn't matter what I say. I can tell you this is the best thing since sliced bread. It doesn't matter. But if I just give you all the information, let you
Yeah.
decide,
Make
then
the
you
decision
decide what you
yourself. Yeah.
right. And then the last thing is, understanding the other person's hopes, fears, and dreams. Like, a lot of let's just use Strata as an example, and then people can extrapolate to their own practices and careers. A lot of people that sell stuff to practice owners focus on feature. Hey, by the way, we do this, this, and this, and this. Rafi, listen, we can do this, this, and this, right? Meanwhile, you're sitting there on the other end of this and you're like, buddy, I just want to get paid. And, this doesn't matter. I don't, but you're polite. You'll tell me, that's very neat, Paul. You've got cool features, right? But in your mind, you're thinking, God, I got another mouth to feed, come on. Like, and so everything we talk about, even if you were to like, if so, I hope your audience tries this. On our website, there's an 800 number. Call the 800 number and just cold call it randomly for like block your phone number. I don't care. Just call the 800 number. And when somebody picks up here, and there's only like 30 of us, so you're going to know who it is anyway. Call them and you say, hey, listen, I'm a PT. Listen, I don't have time. I only remember your phone number. I'm sitting on this street corner in Wisconsin. Can you just quickly Google the closest pizza place for me? They're going to do it because we've built this whole culture of like, just give, like, like, yeah, it doesn't matter. We're not a pizza company, but somebody called us for help. Let's just help them.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And then that's the makings of something remarkable.
Yeah. No,
So
that's great.
that's what I love about your content strategy too. I don't know if you've ever thought about it this way, but when I like was getting to know your brand and what you guys are doing, it's like, whether you know this or not, your own style, but your team style is very similar in the sense that like you guys just sort of give the content away, and the way you deliver that content is genuine. Like my rational brain knows that you guys are capitalists and you got to get paid. My rational brain knows that, right? But most humans make decisions on emotions anyway, and it's like, hey, this person seems like genuine.
Yeah.
And that goes a long way. So anyway, I know we've kind of gotten off the topic of RCM, but I'll just stop that part by just saying that, like, I just want people to get paid. And like what we have accepted as normal in this industry is not okay. And before anybody says, well, let's change the system, well, that's above our pay grades. Come on, like
Yeah.
that's like government stuff. You got to figure all that out. Do that if that's what you believe. But the rest of us, we got to get paid tomorrow, the day after, the day after. And let's just be practical about it. So you want to do billing in-house? Well, let's figure out what your process is going to be. You use that example of like, hey, the denial came back and now it's got a code, and what is an 8.5? Well, if you want to have your billing in-house without any technology or whatever, that's fine. Let's start to be serious about what your process is for figuring those things out, keeping your people trained, and all that stuff, right? Like let's be practical about it. On the other hand, you want to use an outsourced billing company, you ask them the question, like, what do they believe that everybody else disagrees, and decide for yourself whether or not you think that's enough to get you what you deserve. So ultimately, we have this stat that's on the website there that says 99.999. It actually goes 6 digits past the decimal point. If your practice is not getting paid at least 99.999% of what you are owed from your payers, your shit's broken. And it doesn't, you don't even have to use us, but just understand that's the benchmark. That's the benchmark. So let me just pause there.
No, in fact, I think that's like a wonderful place to end it. That's awesome. Like ending on the soapbox. And I got to go pick up my kids from school soon, so we'll do that. This has been awesome. If people do want to learn more about you, about Strata, about what you do, where do you want to send them? just stratapt.com?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. If you want to learn more about the business, go to StrataPT.com. You can find me on Twitter and LinkedIn. The funny thing is Paul Singh is basically like the equivalent of Steve Smith in
Yeah, I was
India.
about to
So
say.
there's a lot of us. But yeah, just if you type in Paul Singh Strata, you should be able to find me on LinkedIn or Twitter. And my email is just paul@stratapt.com. And I admit I get way too much email, but if you just put Rafi's name in the headline to say something funny about Rafi in the
Yeah.
subject, and I'll pick it up.
Awesome.
So
Cool deal.
yeah, man, I'm happy to help though. This is great.
Thanks, man. Well, have a good one.
Yeah, thanks. Have a great weekend.